Hello, wanted to make a part 2 to my Intel stock analysis just to kind of collect more details into what I really see as being the growth sector and see them being set up for the next wave of computing. Also want to talk about new developments on how they will be defending against AMD's growth in the CPU market. Looking at the stock right now, it really hasn't moved much from my part 1 analysis. It's pretty much been flat. These are the subjects that I wanted to cover in this video. So number 1 would be the CPU defense against AMD. Then I want to talk about the storage sector growth, and then their 5G growth, and then the big one, which is AI and machine learning growth, where they're kind of going back to bat with Nvidia, and that will include talking about edge computing, VPUs, FPGAs, autonomous driving, and neural network training. So going back to the CPU section of my part 1 stock analysis, where I kind of broke out the CPU market and how big each segment was. On top of each segment, you can kind of see how much revenue that made up for Intel in 2019. And from that, you can see that the laptop segment is where AMD's market share growth hurts Intel the most as far as percent of revenue. And I want to say Intel's management kind of saw that coming, and recently they just refreshed their laptop CPUs. And the CPU refresh is mainly using their latest architectural technology and fab technology, so they decided to use it there first. This would be their 11th gen Tiger Lake laptop CPU, and another benefit that it also has is better integrated graphics, so this should allow for better gaming experiences without the need of a discrete graphics card on laptops. So that will reduce the parts that a laptop needs and decrease the cost of them. It also has better power management, and a lot of laptop OEMs are already including them in designs and will probably be released here in the holiday season of 2020. And from the early benchmarks, it seems like this will allow Intel to recover some of that middle and lower end of the laptop market, while AMD can still control the higher end of the market, which would be the smallest segment of the laptop market, as most of the market's moving now to Chromebooks. Next, I want to talk about number 2, which is the storage sector growth. This is a sector I wasn't paying much attention to until the latest earnings call, where they show that this sector had a 76% year-over-year growth, and they call this their non-volatile memory solutions group. This includes their Optane and 3D NAND technology as well as their SSD technology. So it's mainly targeted towards data storage in data centers. So obviously that sector is growing, and given the acceleration in data center, that's only going to be increasing here in the future, hence why I think it saw 76% growth year over year. And given how much data companies are collecting, I think that makes natural sense to continue growing at a pretty rapid pace. Next, I want to talk about number 3, which is their 5G growth, and I think everybody kind of knows 5G is coming up, and 5G is one of the segments that Intel has invested heavily in and wants to be one of the market leaders. So for 5G, Intel focused on the networking infrastructure processing needs that the industry will have going forward. They initially had a goal of capturing 40% of the networking infrastructure business for 5G in 2020, but given contract wins, they've moved that to 2021. This goal was also helped by global pressure of moving 5G infrastructure away from Huawei. So Intel kind of partners with the Huawei alternatives, which are Ericsson and Nokia. And this is a market segment that Intel management sees as a $25 billion opportunity by 2020. And the investments in this segment do help other sectors of the business as far as like edge computing and laptops. Those will also need 5G. Lastly, I want to cover what I think is probably the biggest opportunity for Intel going forward, which is AI and machine learning. And I think this is pretty much a battle between Intel and Nvidia at this point. Nvidia's recent growth has pretty much been fueled by this sector, and I think they're pretty much going to be reinvesting heavily to keep their stance as a leader in this sector, while Intel also makes investments here. And Nvidia has an early lead in this sector mainly because GPUs are better suited for AI and machine learning than CPUs. However, Intel is making a lot of investments in this sector, and I think Intel will start making ground as they make systems specifically for machine learning and AI. So for AI and machine learning, there'll be multiple needs in the market. So there will be the need for edge computing and then data center computing. Edge computing is more of computing on site or on the device. So think of like drones or facial recognition, stuff like that. That's edge computing. And most of Nvidia's current business is data center. Intel's heavily investing in both sectors, but I will cover the edge computing side first. So one of the investments that Intel has made in edge computing is VPUs, which are visual processing units. In 2016, Intel bought Movidius, which is a VPU company. VPUs are basically purpose-built processors for processing visual feeds. Some common uses for them are for facial recognition, for autonomous drone driving, and other manufacturing uses. Intel makes their own drones with their own VPUs for certain industries, as well as being used for DJI's popular drones. And I think as the drone segment grows and other processing units for visual feeds grows as well, I think this segment will be growing. I also see the VPU market growing as people get more creative with use cases. Like for example, Tencent and Intel teamed up to make an AI-powered retail security system. So I think that market's just getting started, and with Intel's focus, they're going to be driving to make those processors better and better. So next I want to talk about FPGAs, which are field-programmable gate arrays. So these are hardware units that can be programmed later on in software for specific uses, as well as allowing you to optimize your design via just software and not needing to update your hardware to do that. And using FPGAs as a form of edge computing makes a lot of sense. That's why Microsoft has made a lot of investments in this space. Microsoft added FPGA programming to Azure, as they see people using Azure to program FPGAs and then deploy them and manage them. FPGAs basically give companies the flexibility of being able to program whatever needs they need for processing, and I think Intel saw the potential growth on FPGAs in the future. So in 2015 they made an acquisition of Altera, which was a big FPGA company, and I think the need of FPGAs will continue to grow as more people need edge computing. Intel's FPGAs are already being used for Microsoft, and I think as AI becomes more of an important factor in military uses, FPGAs will also grow as they are more rigid and meet a lot of military requirements for being used. And the last example of edge computing I wanted to cover was autonomous driving, as in 2017 Intel bought Mobileye. And Mobileye's main goal is to get autonomous driving with a fusion system of their vision cameras and LiDAR. Mobileye does provide individual sensors, but they also want to work on an entire system themselves to be able to partner for robotaxi services. And Mobileye has signed robotaxi partnerships with certain car vendors. There are several presentations with the Mobileye CEO where he's showing pretty decent progress on their autonomous system. They're predicting to have their autonomous system up by 2022. Next, I wanted to talk about probably the biggest section of the AI and machine learning growth. That would be the neural network training. This is currently a section of the market that Nvidia pretty much owns, mainly because GPUs are better at neural network training than CPUs. And given how much AI will be used in the future, neural networking training is going to be a big portion of that, as far as speed and flexibility and then power use. So that's mainly where Nvidia's data center revenue is coming from, and also where Intel's investing a lot of money. Intel's strategy is to build a system from the ground up that's specialized in neural networking training, and they've made a lot of acquisitions in the space, as well as having internal R&D into it. In 2016, Intel bought Nirvana Systems, which focused on neural network training, and from then on built a neural networking training system. However, it seems like they didn't get it right in the first attempt, as they got feedbacks from their large clients saying that the results weren't that good. So Intel took their learnings from that experience and then bought Habana Labs for $2 billion at the end of 2019. And Habana Labs was also an artificial intelligence chipmaker that's helped with neural network training. So I assume both teams will be working together to make a system to beat out Nvidia's current system. And I think once Intel kind of figures it out, Intel will be able to sell it and scale it out to their current data center customers. But it's pretty clear that a purpose-built system will outbeat Nvidia's system if they don't adapt it, because processors will have certain optimizations to do certain workloads. Either way, I don't think this is a winner-takes-all segment, mainly because the need for neural network training will be so high in the future that both systems will have to pretty much be at capacity. I think Intel also owning their own fabs will also help them in this. But research in this area also helps their other sectors. For example, Intel processors have Deep Learning Boost, which is an accelerator that they now ship in CPUs that software vendors can take advantage of to accelerate certain AI tasks versus a CPU, as well as the performance gain that they will gain in the edge computing section. So to me, Intel's acquisition strategy and just strategy in general across CEOs still makes sense. I think they're building a pretty good portfolio of different technologies that will be able to have pretty good synergies. For example, their 5G network business can help their FPGA business as well as their VPU business. And I think a portfolio of different technologies is probably the best strategy when we're still kind of defining what we need. I think as we get further along in these technologies, we'll find more complex problems that we'll have to include synergies between all of these. And there's also the fact that Intel has one of the largest R&D budgets, so I do think they have the technology and the talent to be able to tackle any computing problem they come across. That's kind of it. I just wanted to put my thoughts together across the segments of Intel that I researched, just because some of these might not be clear. If you'd like to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe, and if you have any questions, leave them in the comment. See ya!